The quiet gate. Denver International Airport always seemed to hum with a strange kind of static somewhere between anticipation and unease. That April morning, it was more than just the crisp air or the heavy skies threatening a spring storm that made the terminals feel dense. Something else hung there silent, watchful. At gate 42, a man in a charcoal gray suit stood with the kind of stillness that only comes from years of carrying weight no one else sees. His name was Preston Lane, 58 years old. No entourafe, no grand entrance. Just a man with a worn leather briefcase, a navy silk tie tied with care, and a pair of shoes polished not to impress, but out of quiet respect for where he was going. In his hand, he held a first-class boarding pass to Austin, Texas C2 Aon Phoenix Air, Flight PX 194. He was scheduled to give the opening keynote at the Global Sustainability Leadership Summit, an event Phoenix Air had poured millions into sponsoring to reinvent their corporate image. Preston had been through airports on 5 continents. He'd spoken in rooms where every suit cost more than his car. But nothing ever changed the moment before boarding. How people looked at him. How they waited for him to justify his place. He approached the gate desk and smiled politely. The agent, a young woman named Kelsey Monroe, recently transferred from Austin, looked up. Blonde hair, pulled into a tight bun. Polished appearance. Corporate pin, neatly clipped to her navy blazer. She took the ticket, glanced at it, then looked up at Preston. Her eyes lingered too long. The slight furrow in her brow betrayed what her mouth didn't say. This gate is for first-class passengers only, sir. Preston didn't flinch. He gave her a look that was neither offended nor surprised, just tired. I am aware, he replied, voice smooth as rain on glass. She hesitated, then reluctantly scanned the ticket. But instead of handing it back or welcoming him aboard, she asked for a second form of identification. Just a standard procedure, sir, she added, too quickly. Without resistance, Preston reached into his jacket, produced his Arizona State ID, and placed it gently on the counter. Kelsey didn't scan it. She whispered something to a nearby co-worker, then made a call. Within minutes, a TSA agent appeared, a stocky man with a rigid posture and watchful eyes, positioning himself beside Preston as though escorting a liability. Preston stepped aside quietly, not because he was told to, but because he had long learned how to make space for people who didn't know how to make room for him. And then, without a single word of protest, he pulled out his phone. Simone, he said calmly, I need you to pull up the Phoenix Air Western Routes contract. Yes, the $148 million one. I'm being delayed at Gate 42, Denver International. No incident. Just assumptions. You know what to do. On the other end of the call, Simone Marshall, Preston's 36-year-old executive assistant and a strategic brain behind Lane Tara Foods, didn't ask for clarification. She didn't need to. Back at the desk, Kelsey grew more unsettled. Her colleague, Maria, leaned over. I think I saw his name on the summit brochure, Maria whispered. Preston Lane. Doesn't he run that food logistics empire? Kelsey's face paled. The name now echoed louder than her assumptions. Still, no apology came. Preston didn't move. He stood calmly beside the tall glass window overlooking the tarmac, where ground crew loaded bags under the golden tail fin of the Phoenix airplane. His posture was unshakable, not defiant, not passive, just quietly immovable. Passengers whispered, "Wonder what he did. Does he not have a ticket?" Not one person asked him. Minutes later, Simone's call to Phoenix Air Corporate reached the desk of Caroline Vaughn, the airline's senior VP of partnerships. She immediately contacted regional operations. Within another 5 minutes, Vanessa Kim, regional executive director, was en route to the gate. By now, Preston had become a presence. Not a disturbance. Not an intruder, just a silent mirror reflecting every unspoken judgment people had walked past without seeing. When Vanessa arrived, her breath caught for just a second. She knew who he was. Everyone in upper corporate did. She stepped toward him. "Mr. Lane," she began carefully, "I want to extend my sincerest." He raised a hand. "I'm not looking for an apology, MS. Kim," he said, "I'm looking to see whether your system can recognize its own mistakes." The air around them thickened. She swallowed. We're already contacting training, HR, legal. Preston's gaze didn't budge. You think this is about one employee? He asked, not cruelly, but with a patience forged in decades of restraint. It's about the framework that told her it was okay to question my place. Silence followed. Then came a voice from behind them. I saw everything. A well-dressed woman stood, her name badge identifying her as Yvette Moraliza Phoenix, Air Board member. She stepped forward, her voice clear. This is the man who helped save our Western logistics operation. We brought him on not as a formality, but as a reformer. Today, we failed him. Vanessa lowered her head. Marcus Gray, the head of customer relations, stepped beside her. Mr. Lane, he said, offering a revised contract. We're instituting immediate policy change and company-wide retraining. Preston didn't touch the document. Start with this. Treat every customer like they hold a future you don't understand. Because they just might. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to walk away in anger. Instead, he turned and walked through the gate. Behind him, Vanessa instructed all operations at Gate 42 to be suspended. Kelsey Monroe, the gate agent, was quietly escorted to the security office. She sat alone at a cold metal table as Jerome Beck, head of internal investigations, reviewed her file. I didn't know who he was, she whispered. That's exactly the issue, Jerome replied. You didn't know, and yet you assumed. The word suspension lay between them. You'll undergo retraining, he said, and if you return, remember, the measure of professionalism isn't in protocol. It's in perception. The image of Preston Lane standing in silence by the window had already gone viral. Captured by a college student seated nearby, the photo carried no caption, just a powerful still. A man alone, composed, holding his phone while surrounded by inaction. Over the next 48 hours, Phoenix Air's inbox flooded with demands for explanation. Investors threatened to pull out. Partners called for accountability. And on the tarmac, Flight PX 194 departed 47 minutes late. Preston Lane sat in seat 2A. Not a single complaint was heard. Because everyone on board now understood, this wasn't about delays. It was about recognition. That week, Phoenix Air launched the Reset Initiative. Mandatory bias training for all employees. A restructured evaluation system for ground agents. A new clause added to every partner agreement, the Lane principle. Customer first. Assumption last. When Preston arrived in Austin, he walked on stage with no fanfare. The auditorium was packed. Over 500 leaders in food, aviation, and environmental strategy awaited his speech. He spoke of systems, of produce, of ethics. He never mentioned the gate. But everyone knew. Assumptions, he said, don't always come loud. They creep in quiet. But their consequences echo. And then, almost at a whisper, sometimes the loudest disruption is silence. No applause was needed, but came anyway, deep, slow, resolute. Months later, that image Preston by the glass was framed in the Phoenix Air headquarters under one line. We listened when he said nothing. And because of that silence, an entire system began to change.